Heartbreak in Turkiye and Syria after a powerful earthquake and multiple aftershocks simply devastate the region. Rescue teams are right now digging through flattened buildings in search of survivors. Hi everyone, I'm Sean Calebs filling in for Anand Naidu, and you're watching The Heat. Welcome. A massive rescue operation is underway across southeast Turkey and northern Syria after a 7.7 magnitude earthquake and aftershocks leveled thousands of buildings. Rescuers are right now combing through the rubble in search of survivors and working in near freezing temperatures. Countries all around the world are rushing to send search and rescue teams, equipment, and of course aid. We begin with this report from CGTN's Madevi.
I'm in Malatya right now in one of the areas that has been hit by the two major earthquakes that took place in Turkey on Monday. At least 140 buildings have been destroyed in this city. As you can see, it's been snowing in this region on and off since Monday. That's made rescue efforts much more challenging for emergency workers who are still looking for survivors under the rubble behind me. Rescue efforts have continued across 10 different provinces in Turkey since Monday. At least 5,700 buildings have been destroyed. So there is a lot of effort, a lot of areas to cover for these rescue efforts. And temperatures are freezing cold, so it's becoming much more challenging to survive for the people who are trapped under the debris. Turkey issued a level 4 alert on Monday morning as soon as the earthquakes took place, and that means that they called for international assistance. Already some support has arrived from international teams, for example, from Switzerland and Romania. They're already active in Turkey in different provinces, and many more are on the way. And it seems like Turkey is going to need all the support that it can get in the upcoming days. Madevi for CGTN in Malatya.
Joining us now is Madevi Sun-Suon. She's the head of communications and reporting with the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in Turkey. Maddie, again, thanks very much for chatting with us. I can't imagine what you and so many other people are going through there right now. Now, you're in Gaziantep, the epicenter of this earthquake. Tell me what the conditions are like there right now, what you have seen so far, and really how are people holding up about a day and a half into this disaster?
Yes, well, their experience just really shocked us all. We woke up in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. Only yesterday, though it feels like many days already have passed, to everything shaking. We do know the area is prone to earthquakes, but many people never experienced anything to this scale or magnitude. In Turkey alone, more than 3,000 deaths, 21,000 injuries have been recorded so far. More than 5,000 buildings have collapsed in the country. And then in northwest Syria, which is what our office is mandated to coordinate the humanitarian response, more than 3,000 deaths have been recorded and 21,000 injuries. So, and the unfortunate things is, apologies, more than 1,500 deaths in northwest Syria and 3,000 injuries have been recorded. But, these numbers are only increasing by the hour. So they're not even accurate to an extent because they just keep going up. In terms of our experience here in the office in Gaziantep, we've been working with a lot of logistical constraints. We had chronic internet disruptions yesterday. We did not have electricity yesterday, but today we did, thankfully, and we still don't have running water. We don't have gas in the office. And even today, we're still experiencing aftershocks. More than 300 aftershocks have been reported. I personally, I felt one at 6 p.m. today.
Wow.
So the situation is just very much unpredictable and very dire.
Yeah, my experience in being in areas like that after the major earthquake is people are simply terrified. Tell us about your experience, what it was like, because we've heard people say this violent rocking went on for more than 2 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it struck at a terrible time at 4 a.m. and there was snowing at the same time because, this is still a winter season. So it was cold outside and snowy. And I think all of us were just in shock. Everyone was probably asleep. I personally was asleep and was just waking up to my closet shaking and just everything just shaking. Yeah, what felt like an eternity,
Yeah.
even though it was, some minutes.
I think we have all seen the pictures now. You talked about the weather conditions, the snow, the rain, the cold, people forced out into the streets basically with what they were wearing at that hour in the morning. We know that the UN has said this is a dire time. People are in desperate need of humanitarian assistance and they need it immediately. This came from Secretary General Antonio Guterres. What is going to come next and how is your office going to help coordinate this?
So we as OCHA and Gaziantep, as mentioned before, we have a mandate to coordinate the response in northwest Syria. But this is day 2 again, and many of us are still recollecting from yesterday. Again, working under logistical constraints, doing the best that we can. We have partners who are still reaching out to see what their partners are on the ground in northwest Syria, looking out for their colleagues, looking out for their families, their loved one. So there's a personal level that affects us, a personal component to this as well that affects the response. But we are working closely with partners to assess the situation to the best that we can, to identify gaps and needs, because we do need these information as quickly as possible to respond effectively. If the situation I've described was like this in Gaziantep, I mean, it's hard to imagine what it's like in northwest Syria, right, where 4.1 million people today depend on humanitarian aid just to get by. So we're very concerned with the situation. We hear that responders are doing all their best, but without necessary equipment like heavy machines and also winter conditions, it just complicates the efforts.
And also are you concerned that there could be 2 dramatically different emergency responses unfolding, one in Turkey, as you mentioned, the other in Syria, just because of the situation going on there, fighting for the last dozen years, and there's only one road, one pathway between the 2 nations that has been deemed safe by the United Nations. Your concerns about that, and how will aid get into there?
Well, right now we are concerned because the cross-border response has been temporarily disrupted. As you mentioned, the Bab al-Hawa border crossing at the Turkiye-Syria border is the only border crossing authorized by the Security Council for UN delivery of aid to northwest Syria. Unfortunately, we hear that this border crossing is closed as of now, and also there are damage to roads or road conditions that's not accessible, particularly in Turkey, from Gaziantep to Hatay, which is where our UN transshipment hub is. And this is the location where the hub where we monitor our aid, where we verified aid before it goes to Syria. So this has been a challenge for us, and we're exploring other routes and conducting assessments under feasibilities to ensure that aid gets to the people most in need, and that's our main priority.
Madevi, again, hats off to you for being there and assisting people. Our best of luck, and our hearts go out to you. Good luck there. It's going to be very, very difficult days and months ahead, and I know beyond your personal suffering, what you're going to have to deal with as well. Thank you again for your time. Madevi Sun-Suon in Gaziantep. Thank you. For more on the devastating earthquake, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Aleppo, Syria is Filippo Agostino. He is the country representative for Syria with the AVSI Foundation. Also joining us, Luna Safwan, an independent journalist based in Istanbul, and Yakzan Shishakly. He's the CEO of the Maram Foundation in Gaziantep. I want to start with you, Yakzan. Kind of bring me up to date where things are. I mean, it's so heartbreaking to be on the other side of the world and watch this and just the whole world feeling so helpless. I've seen that 2 infants already pulled for rubble, including 1 newborn. The mother delivered the child under the rubble. They were able to save the baby, but not the mother. How agonizing is it being there right now for you?
Well, it's something. It's very, very hard to describe. I mean, not only buildings are falling now. Some buildings has no electricity, no power. Some areas with no phone connection. And I'm talking not only about Gaziantep. I was in Kahramanmaraş yesterday. I saw buildings literally on fire. I mean, some streets are broken, some streets are blocked, and temperature. In addition to all this, it's like 0 Celsius. So it's overall, it's just like it's something. It's really hard to describe. I know everybody's trying to help and support. The community is sticking together. That's what's really important. Some places, the restaurant open to give free soup, bread to the people, and that's a big thing.
And tell me a bit about your foundation, what it does, how important it is right now. And this is really a time the whole world has to come together. People have to put borders aside. They have to put the political divisions aside.
Absolutely. We founded Maram Foundation over 10 years ago. We had two programs, one in Turkey, one across border in Syria. So we're working with the internally displaced people and in Turkey as well. So as a civil society, we try to support any initiative, root initiatives, where bring society to a better future. So we work in accounts and camp management. We do tents distribution. We do emergency, after-war emergency. We also have a big program in education, and we work in the protection and the trauma for children.
Filippo, let's go to you in Syria, because there is kind of two different stories unfurling right now. So much of the aid is easy to get into Turkey, well, easier. Syria, of course, is in the midst of a 12-year ongoing conflict, a lot of refugees in that area, and we know that the Assad government has said to the world, we want all aid to come through our government. And the U.S., which is sending 79 rescue teams over there to the region, has said we are not going to cooperate with that. What are your concerns right now?
Well, of course, the situation in Aleppo is dramatic. We cannot compare to Gaziantep, but there are a lot of deaths, there are a lot of people wounded, there are a lot of IDPs. At the moment, we are talking about thousands of people. So the situation is quite difficult. Of course, all the humanitarian aid move quickly together with the local authorities to give a response to this tragedy. But of course, we need more international help, not just for answering this emergency, but for the months that have to come. So for sure, Syria has been affected since 12 years by war, by sanctions, by cholera. In the last period, Aleppo was hit by an epidemic of cholera. So all these kind of tragedies, of course, bring people to be really desperate, and we need, of course, the international help.
And Luna, we know that the Turkish President Erdogan has called for 7 days of mourning, and it's going to be a prolonged state of emergency. Right now, of course, everything is a search and rescue operation. But tragically, in the days to come, it's going to turn into a search and recovery mode. Tell me what it's like to be kind of the eyes of the world right now, watching what this is going on, reporting it. It has to simply be agonizing.
Of course. I mean, here we're trying to report on two tragedies that cannot be separated one from the other. You have a country like Turkey, where you have the infrastructure, where you have the response, where you have the ability, even though it is overwhelming, it's beyond describable. And then you have Syria, where you are counting on a few hundreds of men from the white helmets, for example, to rescue thousands of people who are entrapped in buildings that have absolutely no infrastructure left after 12 years of war, clashes, barrel bombs, shelling, and so on. We have to balance between the reporting on both sides, but at the same time, we have to remind the world, as you were saying, that this is a time where aid must reach every single corner, whether it is inside war-torn Syria, whether it is inside Turkey. Of course, it is hard right now to understand how to prioritize, because the challenges in Turkey itself are not being prioritized rationally. Whoever gets to the spot first tries to rescue the bigger amount of people, because the first 24 hours and then the next 24 hours are crucial. And so between Syria and between Turkey, the efforts are not really balanced, but this is what a natural disaster looks like, sadly. I think a great way forward would be to just ensure that enough aid can get into a war-torn country, as much as the response is being sort of fast on the ground in Turkey, even though the cities are huge. Right. I mean, millions of people have been displaced.
Yeah, and Filippo, if I can talk to you just a bit about the sense of urgency that's going on right now. Do people feel that on the ground, or are they still just so traumatized in such a state of shock? We've seen buildings collapse, so clearly that sense of urgency has to be there.
Yes, I mean, the people are clearly shocked. The earthquakes carry on, so the people are still on the street. Of course, there is a lot of buildings here in Aleppo that fall down, around 50. I repeat, the people is traumatized, but not just by this single event, by all the tragedies that happened in the last years. So war, COVID-19, socio-economical crisis, and cholera epidemic, and now also this earthquake.
And Yakzan, tell me about that sense of urgency, the battle against time. How dramatic is it right now?
It's very, I mean, I just mentioned the baby they brought the baby out of under the rubbles. And that's how fast we have to. It's urgent. People under the ground looking for help. We've seen some cases where they're calling their relatives please, we need help. I've seen this in Hatay, or we heard about it actually in Hatay, where people are calling, we're under here, please send somebody to help us. So and those people don't have too much time. They cannot survive for long if we don't go and help them. And we're talking about the cold weather, about the need of food, for medical services, and that's on both sides. I mean, in Syrian side also, it's very hard. I'm talking about northwest Idlib. We're already behind in medicals. We're already behind in medical hospitals, medical supply. We're already behind in civil society numbers and men. So we really need all kinds of support on both sides. We believe all modality should be implemented and put all the political differences aside.
Now, when researchers, scientists begin a forensic takedown of exactly what happened, how this earthquake unfolded, a lot of people are going to look back to 1999 when Turkey first implemented stricter building codes following an earthquake, 7.4 magnitude that killed some 17,000 people. I know it's early. I hate to ask this, but do you think people are frustrated? Look, these codes simply were not followed, or we would not have devastation like this.
Just like you said, it's early. I mean, my building shake we're crazy. I woke up because it shook, and I had to run. I live in the 10th floor. But I mean, the last thing I want to think about is if the building, according to the structure or not. Most of the buildings were fall were built before the date when they put the code, and that's why I noticed. But again, I cannot really follow the code. I mean, you hear kids around here crying. It's just it's really, really not easy time.
That's about as real as it gets. Luna, if I could get you to answer the same question.
Of course. Of course. I think that from what we've read online, a lot of the commentary included screenshots of specific measures that were sold to tenants in certain buildings where they were promised on when they went to rent the building that this is an earthquake proof building, or this is a building that has a zero policy, which is which has bases that basically protects you when there's a strong earthquake, because this has been expected. To be very frank, this has been expected on a much higher scale in Istanbul. And this is a conversation that we always have here in Istanbul: is our building safe? However, it's also a private market. It's also a tough market. You cannot make sure that all of the codes are followed unless the government really tracks every single building. There was a time when only very old buildings were falling apart when a smaller and less severe earthquake would hit in Istanbul, for example, or in other areas like Izmir. But then you also have a new building. There was a video that went viral, actually, of a new building that was where apartments were handed in exactly a year ago to new tenants. So this building is so new. It says on the paperwork that it followed the right codes, and yet there are videos of this building falling apart yesterday, right after the earthquake hit. So it is early to predict this, but I do feel that there are going to be a lot of questions, especially to contractors and to companies that specifically sell you this on the contract, and then you see your building fall apart as you have made it out. There will be definitely questions, and there definitely will be anger. But one thing to keep in mind is that, and this is something scientific that we've all been reading, you can sort of predict that an earthquake is to happen in certain cities and certain countries, but you can't really predict it. You can predict it based on speculations and based on previous experiences, based on some scientific numbers. But do we really know? And this is the question. So the proactivity has to come from contractors, and it has to come from people whose responsibility is to do this quarterly, yearly check on buildings in specific areas.
That's the first time I've heard that. That is really something. Filippo, I want to talk more about Syria, because right now the UN only has one road that it allows its entities to go through from Turkey into Syria. Clearly that's going to have to change. How is it going to change, and what is it going to mean for all the refugees up in the northern part of that nation who are simply at odds with the Assad government and just the ongoing political fighting among so many nations in that one little pocket of the world?
Well, I think that the Syrian people has been punished too much. It's the 12 years crisis with all is going to happen. So I think it's time that something politically, humanitarian speaking, must change, because the people really are suffering. As my colleague said, the winter, even in Syria, is very cold. Tonight in Aleppo we are -3 and people are on the street or in welcoming center organized by local authorities and humanitarian association. So I think that I don't have for sure a solution, but what I can report to you that something has to change, because of course 12 years in this condition, every one of us will be not only shocked by the tragedy that happened, but really Syrian people start to lose the hope for the future. And our work, humanitarian work, is also to bring back this hope for the future.
Yakzan, I've seen the footprint of where the severe damage was in areas of Turkey as well as Syria. And again, I'd like you to follow up on what Yakzan was just talking about, the fact that the people of Syria have suffered so much. How much more can they take? Your concerns about trying to get aid into Syria as opposed to Turkey?
Well, I mean, every time we think it's the last thing we can handle, something new happen. We're talking about the cholera break, we're talking about the economic situation, we're talking about COVID-19, we're talking about the war, and now the earthquake. Honestly, Syrian people cannot handle it anymore. We cannot handle the severe storms we're having, and every year we think things will change, and it doesn't. So we're really looking for a solution. And beside all this, funding situation is not getting better. Funding is going less and less, where we like the fund that can support less hospitals, less schools, less food. And I mean, we're talking about almost 14 million people now, like reaching the poverty level. So basically, Syrian people cannot handle it anymore. Yes, their resilience. Yes, they're trying to maintain strong, but it's not easy.
And Luna, what about you? Do you have any plans to leave Istanbul and try to go down to the devastated area? Because obviously the concerns that we just heard about from Yakzan are going to come up. Cholera, other diseases, and the fact there's just so much devastation and really nowhere for anyone to go. It's not like they can go to a hotel or stay with a relative.
Of course, to answer your question, we already have so many colleagues that went down to southern Turkey. And now the thing is that we don't want to halt any efforts for rescue teams. And as you said, there is no place to stay. I know colleagues who are staying in cars or in caravans. So we really don't want to halt any efforts. However, as a reporter, if I am asked to go and if I am needed, of course, I would go to report on the news. But I think that also the important thing is to keep looking at the bigger picture, and is to keep also handling news related to news verifications and to what the political situation is halting. If I may also comment on this part, I do think that this stagnant political situation, sadly, in Syria for 12 years, as your esteemed guests have been saying and adding, is also causing a problematic timing for the aid, because the aid is not reaching a lot of areas, and because not only rebel-held areas in northern Syria have been affected by this earthquake, it's all over Syria. It's in different parts. It's So I think that this stagnant political situation is halting the aid somehow. And we can only expect, as we move forward in this world with the global warming and with all of the changes in the world, we are to expect maybe another COVID wave, maybe other dramatic changes in nature. And everyone has to be prepared. Of course, 12 years of buildup from a war-torn country are not going to help it in any way, no matter how much money we funnel into it and no matter how much we report on it. What matters is that the people have had it and the people are feeling helpless and so tired.
Filippo, we've obviously the human devastation, the human suffering is the top story, the second top story, the third top, but people are eventually going to talk about the damage to buildings. And there's so many archaeological sites in Syria, on the UNESCO World Heritage sites, other things that go back thousands of years, and we've already know that several have been damaged. What is the concern about that right now?
Yes, fortunately, the citadel of Aleppo, that is one of the oldest castle in the world, didn't suffer by this earthquake. But of course, Aleppo was the center of the war some years ago, so the citadel suffered more from bombing, shelling, and the past experience of war. So I just can add, let's remember Palmyra, destroyed by ISIS. So, of course, Syria is a wonderful country. A lot of history is here. Civilization was born in this region together with Iraq. So, of course, war, natural events are destroying this beautiful an amazing historical place, and this is something, of course, we need to think, of course, about, as you said.
Yakzan, we're almost out of time. You have about a minute and a half. If you can, take us there through your eyes, what you personally have seen. What has really stood out that when you went to sleep last night, you thought, I don't ever want to see anything like that again?
Well, I went to sleep in the car for only 2 hours and a half. I saw, like, children crying, women are looking everywhere, elderly people don't know where to go. Honestly, just like movies you don't want to see, like scary movies. I don't want to see it again, wherever it is. I just like the whole pictures. I don't want to see it again. And in addition for that, we're looking for help. We're looking for international support.
When they do see the aid folks come by, what is the attitude from the people there?
Well, I mean, our own office, we turned it into a shelter where we serve some food and tea for public. So basically, people are coming. They're not extra hungry. They're looking to talk. They're traumatized. They're looking for some extra support with some food.
Okay, our panel, I'd really like to thank you all for taking time. I know how difficult the situation is, and you have much more important things to tend to right now, but thank you again for being our eyes and ears over there. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all we have time for on this edition of The Heat. I want to thank all of our guests. I'm Sean Caleb in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.